And welcome everyone to the second iteration of eFolder's MSP Ignition broadcast series. This is Robert Leak, Director of Marketing here at eFolder, and I'd like to wish everyone a good morning, a good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from around the globe. We're definitely excited to have you join us, perhaps for the first Ignition, or perhaps you've joined us on the first one as well. Just as a reminder, we are turning this into a series that will be carrying through 2018 of really MSP best practices and trying to provide to our partners, prospects, and really the community valuable tools that we can in order to help us all grow together. So with that, I would like to again kind of welcome us to what does a client really cost. We'll be joined shortly by our host, Tom Watson, who's leading the Ignition program, as well as Geordi Tijero, owner of CRS Technology Consultants, who is really the source for the information and the wisdom we're going to be getting today. And we'll get bringing both of those folks on here shortly. Wanted to just let everyone know that this is a recorded broadcast and will be available. We'll send this over to you and will be available on the eFolder YouTube channel if you need to come back to it for any point of reference. And also, we want to make this a very interactive broadcast. So as we're going through, maybe you have a question come to mind or see something on the screen that really pops something into your head, just send over the question via the GoToWebinar question on your dashboard there, and we'll try to integrate those throughout the conversations. So with that, I think we've covered most of that. We'll get to our introductions here momentarily and dive right in. I wanted to let everyone know, just kind of, again, welcome you to this eFolder broadcast. And just a quick kind of PSA in the fact of, eFolder may not be who you remember eFolder to be, especially if you were familiar with us a few years ago. We've evolved as a company. We saw the marketplace changing for the MSP and the IT service provider landscape, and saw that, life happens beyond just backup. And we created what we think is the most robust and most powerful solution around data protection in the marketplace today. We have everything from various flavors of BDR with our Replit and Axient solutions. We have the original backup, which is our original eFolder product, as well as cloud-to-cloud backup for Office 365 for CloudFinder, and one of our other flagship products with Anchor with File Sync and Share that provides what we call invincible productivity. It's a collaboration tool, and most importantly, you get instant malware insurance for all your clients with this particular solution as well. So wanted to just make sure that everyone's in tune with who eFolder is today. And again, thank you for your time in joining us. With that, I'm going to pass this over to Tom Watson. Tom has just recently joined eFolder as the Director of MSP Best Practices. So Tom, can you give us a little bit about yourself and kind of how we've gotten to where we are today?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I came on just 6 weeks ago, and my role was brought on by Matt Nackschrab, our CEO, who wanted to kind of have someone here who had worked in the space and had run an MSP, exited one, but wanted to re-enter this world. And I've been a couple of years out of it and have been missing working in managed services and working with vendors. So it was kind of a neat opportunity to go and work, with a vendor and produce our software that I'd actually even used Anchor when I had my MSP. And what I liked about it is I'm here not directly to market sell to anyone, but rather to educate managed service provider owners and on best practices, contracts, costing, basically how to grow your business. And we've got a lot of interesting things planned. We have this webinar series. We have also a repository of our documents, the calculator you have today, and agreements. We're also going to do some direct MSP sales training and best practices for networking. That's coming up in January. So a lot of things planned with the program, and I'm really excited to be here and just looking forward to working with managed service provider owners. Thanks, Robert.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tom. And now to really kind of introduce the star of today's show, Geordi, would you mind giving us a little bit of an overview about yourself, maybe your MSP, how long you've been around, and really kind of where you've kind of seen the marketplace go over the last few years?
Sure. First and foremost, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be involved, and like Tom, really big into giving back into the community that's given me, honestly, quite a good life. And so happy to be here. A little quick thing about myself. I've been a computer geek all my life. Started out on an Apple II Plus in the late 70s and So there you can do the calculation on my age, but really it's just been in my blood, technology, all my life. After high school, tried to get away from it, just couldn't. It was inexorable, and started out my career in IT at that point. Personally, I go back to DOS and Lantastic, so if anybody else on the call knows what that is, cheers. If you don't, then cheers again, because you're better off for it. But I've always been kind of an in the trenches guy, engineer by trade, working the late nights, doing the upgrades, all those kinds of things. But also have a background in business, and I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. And so teethed in the industry in Seattle for 12 years, working on a lot of larger networks, a lot of infrastructure upgrades, a lot of NetWare to Microsoft migrations, a lot of Y2K stuff. And was really, had a great career up there. And then one day my wife and I just decided it was time to get the heck out of Seattle. And family was in Fort Myers, Florida here, so we moved down on a hope and a prayer. And it's worked out quite well. I joined CRS about 13 years ago as just an employee and worked my way up. Became a partner in 2007, and in 2011 bought out my old partner and have kind of taken the ball and run with it. Good segue into the company. So CRS Technology has been here in March. It'll be 30 years. I'm the third owner. The original owners were husband, wife, and son, and they were building white boxes and installing NetWare networks. The company progressed after the first transition into what I call an everything for everybody. The year 2000 was our highest revenue to date, or at that point to date, and we lost money left and right. And that was simply because we were doing cabling, we were doing web design, we were doing document management, we were trying to do networks. We had no focus, and we weren't doing an effective job. And so after 2000, the prior owner decided to focus the company on, I don't know what we would call it these days, a VAR, a IT company, but basically we circled back, we got rid of all the ancillary stuff, and we went to just purely, what's morphed into a managed service. The company really started heading towards what we consider to be managed services now in 2006. We went and saw a presentation by Zenith Infotech about an RMM tool, and it started getting us kind of really interested in what we could do with those, and then it has just literally progressed into now what everybody thinks as an MSP. The current version of our business is about 120 partners, down from 500 5 years ago intentionally. And I know that some of the people on the call, that may give you agitation. It gave me heartburn as we were going through it. But the reality is we've got a fifth of the client. We've got the same revenue. The math pretty much works itself out to the bottom line. A lot healthier of a company. We are hyper-focused on the client. We are a word-of-mouth, referral-only business, and we turn away between 90 and 95% of the business that comes our way, which is also strange to hear since these referrals are coming from clients who already love us. And most people would be worried to turn away a referral business from an existing client. We look at it the opposite way. We have the conversation with the client who referred, let them know why that person may not be a good fit. And also it makes the current client want to be more of a part of what we're doing because they understand there's some exclusivity behind it as well too. We're a little unique in the industry in that we're not into the hardware and software reselling aspect of it. We've got great partners. We resell where we have to, but the majority of our business is driven by the managed services. Our managed services are all inclusive. All you can eat, one-stop shop. You get it all. You know, the service labor, the business continuity, the antivirus, all the things that allow us to properly protect a client. We don't cater to any existing verticals, except for we don't take care of government, just simply because they are traditionally the lowest bid. We look for three things in a potential client. The first one and the most important one is, do we get a seat at the table with ownership? If we cannot get in front of ownership, then we're really not interested in having a relationship, just simply because we don't want to have to go through middle people to get our message across. The second, and probably just as important, is do they have a line item in their budget for information technology? You know, again, we don't want to have to go chasing after dollars for a client. We want to know that they're properly budgeted so that we can implement the items that we need to. And going back to the ownership at the table, if for some chance they're not properly budgeted, we want to know that we're going to have a say and we're going to be able to be part of that budgeting process. The third, and this may sound kind of weird, but do they really understand what a managed service provider is supposed to do for them? Over the years, as we had transitioned from break fix to managed service, and now even looking at BSP instead of MSP, what we learned was if the client didn't understand it out of the gate, odds are our relationship was not going to go well. And you can always look at the end of a relationship back to the beginning and know where you went wrong and what exceptions you made. And so really that's it. We're 19 full-time employees. The majority of them are engineers by trade and do engineering work. We run very slim on the admin side, just due to efficiencies between our PSA, our RMM, and a lot of the other processes we built up. And then that's pretty much us in a nutshell.
Well, that's a hell of a nutshell you've got, Geordi. Sounds like you guys have had quite the evolution over the last 10 plus years or so specifically, which, first off, I think before we even get into the tool, which I know you're going to walk us through, I think there's just some key aspects that I'd like to reiterate, just in the fact that, the three key understandings for your clients and as you're working with them just as prospects. Understanding that you have a seat at the table with ownership and can have those budget conversations, and the fact that they understand your services. It seems like life is full of a lot of just obvious things or things that just should be obvious, but hearing it out loud makes 1,000% sense to me, and I'm sure to the rest of the audience as well. So thank you for sharing just some of those little intricacies as well about what you guys are doing at CRS.
Oh, quite well. I said something real quick, Geordi. Yep. What I liked hearing about was that you're part of the IT truly within the client you have, in that they have a line item and they've budgeted for IT. They understand what IT is there to do, and they're involving you in the process. And that was very important to me, is that I'm not just some service they call, like a plumber when something breaks, that fully integrated into their business at a level where you're part of the business function, you're really a department, so that they're relying you on that way and they're viewing you that way so that they trust you. And when it comes time for contract negotiation, when you put that price out there, it makes sense to them because they're getting the value out of it.
Absolutely, and a great interesting point on that. We don't negotiate on price ever. When our clients get price increases, they just get the price increase because they've already understood that value. A great example is we have a construction client, drywall. His business is booming. He doubled in size. We handed him a doubled price, and he said, "Great, thank you. I expected this." And so, having those things, back to the budgeting piece, we're working 5 years out with our clients on their budget, knowing that full well 5 years from now technology is going to be very different, but at least if we have the dollars in there and they're planning for it, it becomes a lot easier.
I would just like to throw that in there too, is that as a part of the costing, as we lead into that, I handle mine the same way. When I hand someone a contract, I would say, this is our price and this is what we can run your network for. And it was not a negotiation because I was giving them an honest price that was based on what I could do and make the money I need to, and also taking into account the market. And not getting into a big back and forth was very important to me because it never worked well for me as an MSP owner when I used to do that prior to making that change.
Yeah, what's the old saying? If they come to you on price, they'll leave you on price.
There you go. That's good, because now we're going to lead right into
that's exactly right.
How do we figure out what it costs to deliver these services, and of course all of the cloud service that go along with it, and the service you provide directly with your technicians. How do we actually figure that out? And it's a great thing that you've actually come up with a calculator and have been very nice to offer that to us and to our partners.
That's right. And so, Geordi, I'm about to pass over the controls to you. And as I do that, just to address a couple of questions, to reiterate, yes, we will have a copy of this webinar available to all of our attendees and registrants, so we'll make sure you have that. And also, I think someone had maybe I mispronounced, maybe my southern drawl was coming out a little bit too thick, but I think someone asked about a BSP. I don't know that we've referenced B as in boy SP, but we were just referencing MSP, maybe a little bit too quickly at times.
Yeah.
And as well, and then one last thing, Tim had asked, the calculator that Geordi will be reviewing will absolutely be available to this audience and put into the MSP Ignition program repository that Tom mentioned a little bit earlier as well. So, Geordi, I'm going to pass this over to you right now, and we'll dive in. And as I mentioned, if we have any Q&A, I'll let you know.
All right, perfect. Can you guys see my screen?
We do. Yes, we do. But if you could give us that zoom in again on this tab, that'd be great.
Is that better?
I think maybe one more click and we'll be golden. Thank you, sir.
All right, so thank you for teeing it up. This spreadsheet has been an evolution over years, and you know the age-old question I get when companies are trying to move from break-fix to MSP is how the heck do you price it? I'll give you a quick snippet in the bad moves that we made originally and how we landed on this. When we first started making the transition, we went to a few great clients. We said, hey, this is what we want to try out. We're going to take a look at your historical use, and we're going to base a price on your historical use. Sounds logical. Client's been there a while. You've got a good track record of what they pay. Feels kind of safe. The reality of what occurs when you change a client from a break fix to a fixed fee, or what we found, was all of a sudden the floodgates open up. If they're no longer having to control how much they spend because they're flat rated, it's amazing the stuff that comes out of the woodworks. So what we ended up doing to get to this initial design of the spreadsheet was say, okay, we need a couple important things. And to show you what I think is most important on this cost calculator, I'm going to go to the second page and then I'll come back to the first page. Can you guys see this okay where I'm zooming in?
We can indeed, and you're zooming in to us onto the blue box down at the bottom of the tab.
Yep, so this cost per hour. This, to me, is the most critical thing that you can put into the spreadsheet, because outside of your fixed costs for the hardware, for ancillary products, which are all pretty easy, if you don't know what it takes to run your business per hour, you're either going to overshoot it or you're going to undershoot it. I use a very simple methodology to figure out what our cost per hour is. I look at a trailing 12 months. We look at it once a month, and all I do is take all of our complete expenses. I mean, I'm talking everything: wages, insurances. Basically, the easiest thing: go to your P&L, take what it says it costs you to do business over the last 12 months, divide it by the number of employees you have, and then the math to get to hours versus days. And it breaks down and it gives you exactly what your trailing 12 months cost per hour of doing business. As an example, right now here in Southwest Florida, my cost of doing business to run my business is about $65 per hour. So again, that's to me the biggest piece you need to understand about your business before you can use this tool. Once you've got that figured out, this tool is a little bit more straightforward than it may look on its surface. So page 1 here, we call it Counts from SE, Systems Engineer. It's we've never updated the name, but it's a pretty high level look. Okay, so for RMM, I need to know how many devices do I have on the network, because with our RMM product, I get charged based on number of Windows agents and the licensing. And so I want to make sure that for this client, I'm building in enough licenses to cover my RMM costs with this client. When we look at the number of devices, we take a hard look at their network and we add about 10% usually as far as number of devices, just to cover our costs. Second section here, again, pretty straightforward, hosted email services. So we've used AppRiver for many, many years, great partner, and so a reseller of their solution. So again, we need to know how many mailboxes, how many domains, because in this case, AppRiver charges us per mailbox for spam filtering and then a flat charge on the domain. You can see over here right now it's zeroed out, but you need to know what your cost per mailbox is in this case. With AppRiver, I know it's easy. I think I pay 74 cents per mailbox. And so in here you put in, it cost me 74 cents per mailbox. So kind of, same straight through, business continuity, online backup. And the reason we've done this first page, even though it all filters into the second, is this is what we can have our engineers give us as far as information, or this is what we can go into our RMM, and it allows a non-technical person even to fill this out. Antivirus, again, because we're all fixed fee and we're rolling in the AV, I need to know how many Windows machines are going to be on the antivirus solution so that I can have my costs. And then web filtering for any client that may not need a sonic wall or otherwise. Historically, we've used OpenDNS. But again, these are just overall, what does the client look like? How many devices? What solutions are you looking to present for them? And what are the counts that go onto those solutions? So pretty straightforward. Any questions so far on the front page, or are we good?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good now. Geordi, just to reiterate, just because as I was kind of going through this the first time myself, to your point a moment ago, right? This is just essentially kind of setting the stage for the costing aspect, right? This is you've had an in-depth conversation with your prospective client. You've gotten all this information from kind of how their site infrastructure is put together, and these are all just variables that are going to drive the cost from the next tab, correct?
You got it. Yep, dead on. I mean, in reality, you could probably even skip the first page, and if you wanted to, you can see. So like RMM, the devices 5 came over. You know, for us, it was let the engineers give us just the high level number. They don't have to worry about the back end stuff where these numbers are, and so it just made it easy. But again, you could just jump right to the second page. So now you can start to see as it's building this spreadsheet. So it brought over 5 RMM. If we had a cost in there, it would bring the cost over. Same for all these hosted email services. And so this top section of the costing spreadsheet for us basically boils down to hard costs that we have to pay. So RMM, hosted email, spam filtering, all these are typically services that are resold and have to be because they're channel only, and we're very pleased about that. And so it starts building down now. Okay, so subtotals it all up. So we've got a total hard cost of $1,764 per month at this point. I'm sorry. So non-reoccurring $1,764 on the hardware because it knew it was appliance cost. Monthly reoccurring of $500 because it added up all the boxes that were reoccurring. From there, this blue box is where I think a lot of people struggle to come up with time to put in there. So as you can see, it's going to be a pretty straightforward as far as what needs to be in there. How many users, this is going to come over. How many hours per user per month do you think they're going to use? This can be a moving target. What we have found for our business that works is we estimate half hour per user per month. We looked at a long historical, and we found that on average users were using about 0.48 hours per month. And then we also, through some process, figured out that as long as we were properly maintaining the networks and holding their feet to the fire and making sure that the networks were done the way that they should be, that there isn't any reason other than weird oddities that this number can't be true. So from there, it'll calculate hours per month, hours per year, and then based on whatever your cost per hour, I believe in here right now it's set for 100, you can see your annualized cost for this client for their service needs or for remote work is going to be about $120,000 per year. Next line is on-site needs. As much as I'd love to tell you as a managed service provider, we never go on-site to clients, it's probably the opposite. We learned early on that not being in front of our clients enough was a detriment. And so even though they're on all-you-can-eats, we now schedule time to go out, even if we do nothing else but just sit down with the client and talk to them and consult. So in here, we put in the estimate of hours per month. Again, pretty straightforward. It does the math for us. And then the third line item, something that was an aha moment for us after we started this. This annual account review and documentation was not in there as part of our costs. And as we were sitting down doing these QBRs or ABRs for our clients, we looked around one day and we said, okay, we got 4 people sitting in this room talking about this client. We have an engineer who's gone out and pulled information for us. We're putting 12 to 14 hours into each account review, and because we're not line iteming it, we're basically giving that away for free. And as much as I love my clients, I've got clients at home who expect me to bring home a paycheck, and so we added this in. We've also, you can add in other things if they're unusual. Like for example, we have one client who wants us to do very specific security audits at very specific time frames. So we figured that into our calculator as well too, to make sure all of our costs were covered. From here you can see it brings up all the annualized cost. In this case, the annualized cost for the client on the labor here, $131,000, and it doesn't look like the. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So total of monthly reoccurring times 12 plus the annual cost for your labor brings us to $131,000. So in this example for this client, my cost is going to be $131,000 per year. So my monthly cost as a business owner is $10,916.67. I would say that's your break-even point, but we all know that's not really the break-even point. That's losing money. From here, your choice. Right now they're set to 0, but you can put in whatever markup calculations you want in there to give you a price. The reason we have 2 in ours is we have a pretty large not-for-profit customer base here in Southwest Florida that has been very, very kind to us. And also in Southwest Florida, a lot of business is done through the not-for-profits. And so we give our not-for-profits a little bit of a break. You could just have one markup if you say, okay, all my clients are getting 50 points or 75 points, you just put it in there and then it figures out the number for you. This last piece down here will go with XXX. As you can see, these numbers never end up being even numbers. It'd be kind of weird if it did. And I just have a thing for even numbers. You know, I like 3,000, 3,250, 3,500. It's just me. So we end up, you know, keeping this calculator, but going with a round number for the client as well, too. I think it's psychological for the client. You know, if you come at them with $3,864.23, it's going to make their head hurt. If you come at it with $3,900, they're going to be like, okay, that's a number I can stick with. And then this last line item, even though we are all fixed fee and all managed services, there are 2 things that we do not include into our fixed fee agreements. One of them is after hours service. We do not want our clients to be able to just go willy-nilly after hours without something to have them put skin in the game. And the last thing I want is my guys, 2 in the morning, some guy can't print from home. Is that really worth a charge or not? It makes people think about it. So this is just a section for us where we put it into ConnectWise as far as their work types and the cost associated with it. And again, because we've got regular not-for-profit clients, this may change, whether it's $260 an hour for ER, $195, whatever it is. But this ends up being more informational, and if we ever need to go back and look to say, okay, why are we charging this client X versus the other client Y for the after hours, we would also put notes in here as to why. And so really, once you've kind of gone through all this, it gives you the number at the end of the day. And so that's that. Questions?
Excellent. Geordi, first of all, I think you've done such a great job. We haven't had that many questions come in. Just a couple of things. One, we've got a great compliment from Gloria, who's saying that she's just recently added hardware as a service to their offering along with cloud services, and this tool is going to be a great help in simplifying. So thank you for the kind words, Gloria, and thank you, Geordi, from one person specifically that's going to be able to bring this tool to life for them. Secondly, just a question, I know you guys were not always MSP. The question came in, kind of, how has this tool evolved as your managed services have evolved over the time? Because I'm assuming that this maybe looks a little bit different than the first iteration.
Oh, it looks a lot different. So how it evolved was, as we transitioned from break fix to MSP, we were all over the place as far as our profitability per client. We were all over the place as far as hours per client. And so this became just one part of an evolution as to how we look at the fixed fee. The other big part to this is, well, there's actually several parts. One of them is we have another spreadsheet where all of our clients are on there. It's a trailing 12-month. We look at how many hours we expected them to use, because again, even though it's fixed fee, we're building calculations based on estimate of hours. So the spreadsheet allows us to see, okay, company X, we figured they were going to use 1,300 hours a year. They used 1,500. Where did we go wrong? What aren't we doing right? Or is it just them and we hit it way off the mark? The other, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. That never happens. The other piece that that evolved out of this was also the understanding that we were going to have, really one shot, maybe 2 shots per year as far as getting that pricing increase. If I, outside of a client doubling or tripling in size, our model is not to nickel and dime over 1 user or 2 users. We build in enough overage into these agreements where that shouldn't factor it. But we wanted to be able to go back and look and say, okay, this is how we priced it. And what we needed within that pricing, or the way that this evolved, was before we had this finalized, if we wanted to go back and get a real understanding for how we came to a price and why we were so far off the mark, we had to start pulling from different sources. So we'd have to log into AppRiver. We'd have to see how many mailboxes they were using, log into eFolder, see what's going on with their usage as far as the cloud or local. And it became a lot of work to come back to the information when we had the aha moment that if we just put all this information up front when we were pricing it, if we ever had to come back to that information, it was going to be there in the spreadsheet. So you know, as a side thing, what we do for every one of our clients, every time we do this, we save a copy of whatever we do. So some of our clients may have 15 or 20 of these in their folder, just because they've been iterations, they've changed. This also became a necessity because, like I said earlier, we had a pretty good feeling for what our clients overall used as service. And I know there's variations depending on how needy the client is or otherwise, but you know, it became we need to be able to look back and see, okay, were we off because we missed something? Are we off because our calculations aren't correct anymore? Are we off because, you know, more mobile devices, more users? And so we needed, again, to come back to, you know, back to square and say, okay, is it our pricing that's off the mark, or is it, you know, something that's outside of this control? And every time we've tried to, before we go back to this, every time we've tried to have a, you know, conversation, well, you know, they're a law firm, they're just their users are more needy, or they're this or that. 9 times out of 10, what we found by coming back to this is, no, our numbers were right. We're either not doing something right for the client to stop us from having to do all this work. So a great example is, you know, as engineers, a lot of times all we want to do is fix the glitch. And so you know, put your finger in the proverbial dike and, hey, look, no more water leak. So these types of looks and numbers also forced us to take a very serious look at ourselves and where we were falling down for our clients. There are cases where you're just so far off the mark that, you know, it's got to be something other than your costing. It's got to be, you know, it's either that or, you know, like I said earlier, maybe we just didn't even engage with the right client at that point. So this spreadsheet itself has probably been through 12 or 13 iterations over the last 5 years. And it really started out as just a real basic, I think Julie at first just took a blank, you know, spreadsheet, put in what our cost is, what we thought hours were, and just did a, you know, very simple auto sum. The other reason that this spreadsheet has evolved the way that it is, we want everybody within our company that if they wanted to be able to very easily come up with a price for a client. We don't put ourselves into situations where we're bidding on the fly. We don't put ourselves into places where typically it's competitive. But what we do with our employees is once a week we have our admin session where we come up with all this pricing together. And we always have at least 2 from engineering, me from ownership, Julie from ops side. We want everybody looking at it, and then every week we involve at least one of our engineers as well. We wanted this spreadsheet to be easy enough for them to understand. It's amazing what happens when your internal staff really gets a good understanding for how you're pricing. That was one of the biggest game changers for us, not necessarily the tool, but our team being able to see the tool and understand that, you know, we're just not throwing darts at a dartboard to come up with a price. There are very specific things that we're looking at. There are very specific hard costs. What we found once they became more involved was the light bulb goes off for them on the billing aspect in MSP. You know, hey, it's great, all our clients are all you can eat. I can sit here and work on a problem all day long and it's not costing the client anymore, so why are they going to complain? When they see the back end of it and understand that, yes, even though it's not costing the client anymore, it is costing the company more to have you working on that time, it changed a lot of the mentality within our company. We still want to get it done, we want to get it done right, but for them to be able to see, hey, look, we estimated 8 hours per month for this client, and this client's using 25 hours because you went down a rabbit hole to try and fix a problem, it really changes the engineer's focus. And then lastly, the engineers are always floored when we kind of open up this information to them. A lot of companies just don't give the general population all of this information. I'm not a true open book, but I have no problem with my employees knowing what our cost per hour is, what our cost for these services are. Again, it gives them that information and that background to understand how we're pricing, why we're pricing, and why it's important that we also track these things.
Hey, Geordi, that actually leads us into a couple of different things that have come in through the question line. Most recently, there was one about, is this a living document, or do you tend to use it as a one-time tool at the onset? And what I'm hearing you say is that, you know, this tool actually has, a few different purposes within your business model. As far as it being a one-time tool, I don't believe it to be the case. And it sounds like that if nothing else, once you bring a new client on board, you're working with that client for, call it 6 months to a year, this is almost used as a barometer to make sure that you're still making money with that client as you kind of assumed you would be. Is that kind of one way to look at it?
Absolutely. And living document in a sense that we're going back and modifying each one, probably not, but living in the fact that they're, the longer the client's with us, the more of these they're going to have, the more historical, and barometer's a great term to use. Why were we so far off? Did we miss the number of workstations? And so our RMM cost is, we use our PSA to run sometimes reports at nauseum or ConnectWise House, so we can export, based on time entries or work types. So if we've estimated that, 50 users, 2 hours per month, 100 hours on remote, and we run a report for this client and they're showing 150 hours of remote use, again, it's that barometer, and it's also, where were we off the mark? A lot of times we found in reviewing these historically, we may be way high on the remote, we may be way low on the on-site. If they wash themselves out, you can kind of argue, okay, that's not that big of a deal. But in reality, we adjust because we want to make sure when we're looking back, we've got all the right numbers, and also to make sure when we're moving forward, we're pricing it correctly again.
So on that note, I think the question came in about, so do you charge hourly if you walk into one of your clients and they need lots of work? I guess I'll stop the question there and just kind of see what your response is. So you've got an all-you-can-eat plan in place, right? And you go in and your client is maybe looking at 10x the effort that you had originally kind of planned on. What happens then?
All right, great question. So let's just say we expected a client was going to use 5 hours a month and they ended up using 50 hours a month. Wow, that's not a fun one. So what we try to do first and foremost is we first take a 12-month historical look. Okay, is this client ballooning up right now because there's a specific thing that's going on that we are not addressing properly? And I know, again, it sounds weird, but we always look at ourselves. Go ahead.
Geordi?
Yep.
I think the question is, so when you come to a potential new client and you look at their network and you say, okay, for me to take these on and charge them $5,000 a month, I'm first going to need to do a whole bunch of hours to get them up and running at that point. How do you handle that?
Yes. Okay. So great question. Two things that we do. First and foremost, when we do a network audit, we charge for it. I'm a firm believer in not giving it away for free anymore, because unfortunately, when we tried to give it away for free, people didn't see value in it. So now, again, because we're very hyper-focused on that client, and if they have the right pieces in place for us to start the conversation, they're not going to have an issue paying for a network audit. In reality, we may not do business. This audit is going to help them to really understand what they have. Let's face it, they wouldn't be calling us if there wasn't a reason to do so, if they didn't have fears, concerns, bad service experiences. So we want them out of the gate to know where they stand. That also sets the stage for us to be able to say the second piece. For us to bring you on as a client, here is what you are going to need to do. This was one of the hardest things for us to also do when we were transitioning from break fix to MSP. When we first started doing it, we figured, okay, we're going to have to do a whole bunch of onboarding, and so we'll just kind of eat that to get the client on board, and we'll have a spike in hours, and then we'll get them cleaned up, and then the hours will trail off. That never happens. So the second piece is part of that onboarding. They get a project that is separate from their monthly fixed fee. It spells out exactly what they need to do, and those are non-negotiable for us. Again, going back to the end of a bad situation, you can always look at the beginning. Well, geez, they really needed a new, Sonic wall. They needed a new server, but we said, we'll kind of just, live with what you got because you're going to replace it in 6 months anyways. And then we end up eating all the time to keep those things going. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. And the way I always handled this was I would come across a potentially very good client, and I would say, well, this could be a good client, but look at the state of this network. First of all, this is not the hardware that's sufficient for what they need to do. It has not been maintained. And so exactly the same thing. Tell them, listen, we need to audit, find out what you have, and then in addition to the audit, after that, we will give you a price of what it will take to bring you up to our standards at which point then we can offer the follow-on of a contract at this amount per month. So kind of a stepping stone to get them to be a client, but not just taking on anyone, because as we know, Geordi, you did a culling of clients. When you take on everyone, you end up with a whole bunch that really are digging into your profits substantially. So make them pay to be able to be your client if they could potentially be the right kind of client.
Well, and to your point too, the ones that are willing to pay will most likely be the right client because they've already got their head in the right space. It's always been surprising to me when we do the audits and we present the onboarding project. It's never oh my gosh, I can't do it, or it's more of a, geez, why didn't my last provider do this for me? How did we end up in this situation? And they're more happy to know what their exposures are, because even if we don't decide to do business at that point, they've paid us for our services, and now they at least have a playbook that they can go back and say, okay, here's what we found, make it right.
Well, one thing I just want to point out, I liked how you have in here that you're going back and you're looking at the hours you actually spend in that third tab, on the third sheet on the spreadsheet. You can go back and evaluate later on how many hours you're spending. And what I enjoy about that is, if it's a half an hour per user per month, and then you find on some networks you're able to beat that curve and bring that down to maybe a quarter hour. It's important then when you have these sheets and you fill them out and you do these audits that you're going back and you're figuring out, what did we do on this network that allowed us to reduce our number of hours spent? Because then you can take that and you can leverage that with your other clients, and you can make these contracts more profitable as you move forward if you reduce the number of hours spent.
I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, that's ultimately the game as a managed service provider. We're trying to be as efficient as humanly possible for our clients to maximize our income and our profit. If every one of our clients has issues and doesn't have right networks, we're just never going to win.
Exactly, and the easiest way to do that is on those hours spent, because that is the one that you have the most control over. We can't control often the price that anyone's paying for Office 365 or antivirus. There's a little wiggle room, but if we can find a way to make a technician much more effective out in the field, or go into a network like I always like to do and really clean house and get it in really tip-top shape, you can sometimes beat that curve, and all of a sudden your profits on that contract, because your biggest cost is your hours and your people, can become much more profitable.
Yeah, it's amazing, even when we're talking 120 clients, if you just have a few of those out of whack, how quickly it can start to affect the bottom line.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's and we do these looks in our admin meetings and the trailing 12-month, because the other thing we want to be cognizant of is, if we just look at the last month or two, there may be a spike. As an example, we had a client that just had this weird exchange issue, never seen it, Microsoft couldn't figure it out. We knew we were going to be into a spike of hours for that month. But by looking at the trailing 12 months, we could also see that for the last 11 months, the client had really been underutilizing us. Well, I shouldn't say that. We had gotten them so efficient that the amount of hours we thought we were going to have, we weren't using as many. So it also allowed us in that situation to say, okay, good client, we're making it out, so we're going to just go ahead and eat these hours anyways, and then they're going to be happy with it. And that type of being able to have those metrics to make decisions. I'm an engineer by trade, so the only feelings I have, as my wife will tell you, are probably robotic. But being able at the robotic side to be able to unemotionally go back and look at this information really gives us a lot. It's also been the way for us to come up with our hit list for the clients that we're going to call. Plain and simple, if as we were going through this process, we found a lot of clients that were using more hours, and typically those were the clients that prior to us having onboarding and projects were the ones that dragged their feet and didn't do the right things that we needed them to do. And so this also helped us come up with that list of who had to go.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Geordi. We had a question come in that we might be kind of a slight rabbit hole off of the tool itself, but it's certainly about how we manage, or how you manage your clients. What's the perspective, or how do you kind of delving into the standards conversation, solution stack, as well as kind of how you manage your standards with your clients? But the question came in is that what if they don't need anything new, but they don't want to go to all your standards? As a for instance, perhaps they have a Cisco firewall and you or someone else out there in the audience is using SonicWall, and so you're not supporting Cisco today. It's not something you want to train your technicians on. Do you think about bringing them on and trying to kind of rabbit hole that, or do you just kind of have that tough conversation that if you're going to be a client of, your MSP or the audience's MSPs, that you're going to have to move over to that SonicWall solution?
That's a great question. So 99% of the time, and this is after discussion, we will not take on the business because typically, excuse me, the standards may be so far out of whack that, for our engineering staff, engineers, we like repetitive, we like to work on the same things. We do not like when we don't know something. It's just not a comfortable place for us. So the last thing we want to do is put our engineering staff on the back foot or having to know multiple solutions. The other reason it's key for us is we're very heavy into our RMM, always have been, and we want to be able to write the deepest types of monitors for the least amount of hardware, because then we know that we're getting the best out of it. Now, 99%, that leaves a little room, so I'll give you an example. We just started with a new client over on the other coast of Florida. They're a 8-location insurance company, and everything in their current solution ticked the box except for one thing. We're a SonicWall house. They had Meraki's. And so we sat down as a team and we discussed this. Okay, we're not 100% used to this solution. We know it, we can get in, we can manage it. Meraki's are actually very cool because, web-based life moves on. A lot of great tools. So the discussion led to two places. The first one was if the client does everything that we asked them to do, and that was moving to Office 365, getting rid of their servers and doing a few other little things, really what impact does that Meraki have on us at the end of the day? So in this case, it basically was just nothing more than an edge device at the end of the day, just doing NAT to the outside. So in that particular scenario, we had the conversation with the client as well. Hey, look, we are not a Meraki house. We do not know them well. We are willing to take you on. We understand your last provider just had you spend $6,000 on new Meraki's. So here's our give and take. You're going to understand that we're not going to be 100% strong out of the gate. We'll get up to snuff on it. But secondarily, once those things come up for renewal, they're out of here and we're putting SonicWalls in. And if you buy into that now, then great. If not, then really let's not even get into this. And there have been plenty of times where it's not just something as simple as a firewall, it's a bigger thing, and we just walk away from it. If we can't fully support it out of the gate, then I don't think we're ever going to get to the point. It's again going back to the engineering staff. All of our guys here know SonicWalls, they know Dell, they know all of our core products inside out, backwards and forwards. That's what gives us a lot of our efficiency and profitability at the end of the day. In this case, it was a group decision to go ahead and move forward with this client because the risk of the firewalls based on where they were going with their technology was not big enough for us to not do business. And then on top of that, we were so well aligned otherwise with this client culturally, vision, ownership, both owners were at the table, both initial meetings with us, that we felt that it was a risk worth taking because we wanted the client because they fit so much better. And they also knew that at the end of the day that if we were just going to get too frustrated with the Meraki's and it was going to be too difficult to support them, they were willing to switch to SonicWall. And that was something else that was important.
Excellent. And it's fantastic that you were able to kind of meet in the middle there, it seems like, with that client and kind of find hopefully what's works out best on both sides. So thank you for sharing.
Yep.
That also brings us to a good point. As I mentioned at the top of the call, the MSP Ignition Series is a series of webinars that Tom Watson is going to be hosting as we move forward into 2018. And I know that solution standards, vendor standards, that will be a topic in Q1. So for everyone out there, please keep an eye on that because, as the MSP model evolves, I think we're all on the same page that your solution stack needs to be standardized along with it. And, really managing that both internally and externally with your clients is a big deal. So, Geordi, thank you very much for adding some additional perspective even outside the costing tool today. So I do think that we are kind of wrapping up. I think the questions are slowing down. Tom, do you have anything additional for us today?
Yeah, I just want to really thank you, Geordi. It's very generous of you and Julie to offer us the sheet and then allow us to make some changes and make that available to our partners. And your explanation was excellent, in depth, And we hope that you can join us again for another one of these webinars. We've got some interesting topics coming up. We've got on December 13th, we're going to actually have an SLA and a managed service agreement, managed service contract that's going to be one that we have kind of cleaned up and made available, and we're going to show everyone how we fill one out, how we come up with kind of insert some of this pricing, put in some, what do's and don'ts, and then we're going to make that available for download as well. And then also wanted to mention, starting in January, we're going to have an MSP sales training series that goes along within our Ignition program, where we're going to teach sales techniques, elevator pitches, your 30 seconds, what to do, what not to do, networking events, that kind of thing. Kind of teach people how to fundamentally grow your MSP and also how to increase your business for, added valuation on it. Because someday, ultimately, even if you're not going to sell it, you want to be moving towards making your company more valuable all the time.
Well,
so it's all about, Rob.
I'll echo that comment. I love my business, but I want out one day. And one of the things that, as I've been building the business and looking forward towards the end, our businesses are sold on, multipliers of EBITDA. And the more of these types of things you have within your business, the more process, the more things that are built around solid, not just ambiguity or feelings, the more your business becomes worthwhile or worth to the next purchaser. So while a lot of times and while we were going through these processes, it felt like we were doing more work to get to the end result. We also are aligned internally. We kept saying, okay, for the next owner, what's going to help them the most? And so it's a little bit of, putting in time now to really get a nice payoff down the road.
Excellent. I think that's a good wrap up.
Very well put. So on that note, just to kind of reiterate, we will be sending out a copy of this webinar along with the tool itself to everyone in our audience today. So just a parting gift, if you will, but keep your eyes on your inboxes for that. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today, especially to yourself, Geordi. Hope everyone has a great rest of the day, week, and until the next Ignition program, we will bid you adieu.
All right, thank you guys very much for having me. Thanks. Bye.
Appreciate it.